Hey, what's going on, folks? Before we react to Volodymyr Zelensky winning Time Magazine's Person of the Year, because Man of the Year is no longer politically correct, or accurate, I guess, we're gonna weigh in on the Twitter files and the drama going down over the Hunter Biden Twitter information released by Elon Musk, because it seems to be pretty big.
Now we begin with new fallout over the Twitter censorship files. Elon Musk just fired one of the platform's top lawyers, James Baker. He was involved in the initial decision to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story, but Baker had quite the interesting resume before that. It included a stint at the FBI under James Comey, where he was a central figure in the Russia investigation. Baker even told Congress he personally reviewed the FISA application used to spy on the Trump campaign.
Fox News reported today James Baker, Twitter lawyer fired by Elon Musk, played key role in FBI's Trump-Russia collusion probe. According to the report and Twitter, it seems like this guy was the reason for the delay of the Twitter release files. Musk responded that he was exited from Twitter today, and according to reports, he was the FBI's former attorney that was all over the Trump-Russia collusion stuff.
Now he's accused of going behind Musk's back and reviewing the first batch of Twitter files, delaying the release of the second batch. Journalist Matt Taibbi, who first broke the news of the Twitter files, now reveals how Baker's role was unearthed.
What in the world is going on? I brought on an independent journalist today. I'm bringing on an independent reporter today to go over the information with me. And then we'll talk about everyone's favorite welfare queen, Zelensky. All right, the show starts now.
It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles. It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of the Dream Rare Podcast. I'm joined by Taylor Hanson to go over this stuff. What's up, Taylor?
How you doing, brother?
Appreciate you. So yeah, what's going on with the Twitter files? So I guess from what I saw, there was a lawyer who worked for the FBI, was involved in the Russia collusion, and then he was at Twitter, and he was also trying to suppress the files or the drop.
Yeah, exactly. So his name is James Baker. He was essentially, he's ex-FBI general counsel now, so he was a very high-up lawyer within the FBI. He was directly involved in, manufacturing the Russia collusion hoax. His involvement in the Russia hoax, it was the Alpha server. So if you remember Michael Sussman, the campaign lawyer for the Clintons, the Clinton campaign, he concocted up this big fabrication saying that the Trump organization had secret connections and secret communications via server with the Kremlin through the Alpha Bank in Russia. So, that's where, he kind of came in to testify. He actually testified on behalf of Michael Sussman in that trial. And then he was then fired and forced out of the FBI, I believe in 2016, for essentially, he was under criminal investigation. So he was pushed out for leaking things to the press, that's what they said he was pushed out for. He was pushed out for being a crook, essentially, under Donald Trump. And, then he somehow managed to squeeze his way into the Twitter apparatus and actually maintaining the exact same position he had within the FBI, but this time inside of Twitter. So now he was a high-up lawyer within Twitter. And then, where this really comes into it, into the Twitter leaks that Matt Taibbi has been leaking or releasing under Elon Musk, which is funny because Matt Taibbi and Barry Wiseman, they're both very liberal journalists. And I think, it's very intentional on Elon pushing it through these sources saying, hey, this isn't partisan. This should be bipartisan. We're not trying to do a hit job here. We just want to restore the trust in this public platform. But where he really comes in under this is he was responsible for overseeing and vetting these Twitter files before they were released to the public. So, that's why Matt Taibbi actually released them later than they were supposed to be released. And then Barry Wiseman, upon, asking around and saying, okay, who is this James guy? She figures out his last name is Baker. And, in her words, she said, her jaw hit the floor when she figured out who this was. So, and then Elon, of course, immediately fired him afterwards.
Is it Barry Weiss? Is it is it
Yeah.
Weissman or it's Weiss, right? The one
Yeah,
that was
Weiss.
on Joe Rogan and stuff. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So he tried to delay the release. Like, how do you know how he tried to do it? Because I saw that Elon said he exited Twitter after he tried to delay them. Like, how did he do that?
He was essentially, from what my understanding is, he was covering up the FBI sources within the documents. And he actually was involved in 2020 when he got hired into Twitter directly with Vijaya God. Once the New York Post actually released the initial Hunter Biden laptop story, which exposed Joe Biden essentially being a direct beneficiary of, these profits from Ukraine and these other countries, which we all love Ukraine here, right? Super uncorrupt nation.
Here, let me get on my phone real quick. I just want to send more money to Ukraine. I feel guilty to even have U.S. petrodollars in my pocket. Let me try
all
to
the donations from your chat and everything, it's got to go straight to Ukraine, guys.
Right.
But he essentially factored in with Vijaya God, and under this, he said it was at first it looked like Russian disinformation. So he went back to his roots, like the FBI always does, and they said, "Oh, Russia, Russia, Russia." And then, upon actually getting pushback within internal documents, which Matt Taibbi released, is you saw that they said, okay, well, that doesn't constitute us actually taking it down. And then he said, okay, well, it looks like it's the hacked policy. It violates the term of service because it was essentially hacked information. And that was their excuse to limit the New York Post on Twitter and then to actually remove it and make it not shareable.
Right. What do you think about Elon pretty much doing more than the entire GOP to help the GOP? I mean, it's a bipartisan issue. Like you see some of these like honest left-wing journalists in on it too, kind of saying it's important for both parties. But really, he's doing a massive favor to Republicans for doing something about the corruption in social media that they can't figure out how to do.
It's sad. The fact that we have to have the richest man in the world, or at least the richest man in the world on paper, step in to actually do something more than Republicans ever have. I would argue he has done more in the past 2 months for free speech than any of the GOP has with their anti-censorship bills, which we all know, the GOP loves censorship. They're pro-Israel. They pass these bills. You'd like to touch on that topic a lot. But it's embarrassing the fact that we have to have a billionaire step in to actually do the work of what a political party is supposed to.
Yeah, it's kind of, and a lot of people will think that if you compliment Elon, like I say, I'm obviously skeptical of a lot of things, his political policy, Neuralink, the brain chip stuff.
Especially Neuralink.
Right. But he's running Twitter. In a month, he's done more than the GOP really has in years for the GOP and also for social media. I think he's kind of put the pedal on the gas for Facebook and Instagram because, what are they doing? If he can do this much this quickly and kind of weed out the corruption, get rid of useless employees, get at least a little bit more, he's not perfect, but a little bit more fair of a thought process. What in the world is happening at these other platforms and what are other people even doing?
I'd say that the exact same thing that was happening at Twitter prior to Elon taking over is probably taking place within Facebook and Instagram, or now Meta, whatever they want to call it. It's essentially ran by the CIA and the FBI. These are intelligence operations, they're data harvesting programs, which one can still argue that Twitter, Elon Musk loves data, and he's even stated that Twitter is not, a social media company for him, it's a data company. Same with, the Boring Company, Neuralink, everything that he does is all about data, which, that's why I'm kind of skeptical of Elon is, he just wants to harvest data, but at least, we're seeing people restored on Twitter. And it's crazy that, he fired over 75% of the workforce within the first few weeks of him getting there. And child porn has been literally in the tanks since, he took over. So, it took him basically destroying the company, as the mainstream media would say, and firing virtually everybody that's in charge of moderating child porn on this website to actually get rid of child porn. So it's very interesting that he's basically single-handedly has been able to rid the platform of this.
Right. There's real life consequences to political correctness. When you're so, interested in what Trump supporters are saying that you don't care about child pornography, it shows. And also in the cities, obviously any crime and violence, in my opinion, is bad when you're hurting somebody, all of that, regardless of what ethnicity you are. But all of this talk about, even anti-Semitism and racism, look at every major city, which just so happens to have a lot of Black and Jewish people in them. It's they're not safe for anybody. The biggest threat in this country for everybody of every race isn't going to be someone hating them because of their race or political party. It's going to be some demon that's trying to do theft or murder for senseless reasons. And the FBI, I've just a suggestion. It's I love America and there's so much crime in these cities. How much time are they spending on that? And how much time are they spending just trying to connect everything to Russia? I just truly wonder.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that, it's crazy to think that the FBI doesn't have our best interests in mind after they spent the last 3 years locking up Americans that essentially paraded around into the Capitol. So, I mean, it's crazy that the FBI that was behind the Russia collusion hoax and all these other hoaxes, Ruby Ridge, Waco, that they wouldn't have our best interests in minds as Americans. But, it's sad that we can't even state FBI statistics anymore. I mean, they're marked as disinformation. They used to be on Twitter. I remember when they used to strike it down when you would talk about, the rising of violent crime. I mean, they don't even address what the FBI is supposed to be addressing. Instead, they're arresting church pastors and people that want to go and protest out of these abortion clinics.
And I wanted to talk about the data harvesting too, because, that's actually where a lot of the money and power is. Even for Facebook, I heard before they lost a lot of money when Apple put on your phone, do you want them to track your data? Before Apple, I mean, I'm not saying they're the good guys, but this was a good step in the right direction. Now you can hit no and they can't track you. Apparently, Facebook lost most of their money from that, because if they could track you, if they have all of your data, they could sell it to advertisers. And even though they make so much money in other ways, it seems like the real value at all these platforms is just having your data. Once you have the credit card, address, like habits of a billion people, that translates to a multi-billion-dollar business.
Yeah, it's like that. If you've ever seen that Black Mirror episode where they have, the people behind the scenes perfectly crafting, what people need and what people need to look at on their day-to-day life throughout the internet because of their data harvesting, essentially. I mean, that's literally real life. I mean, they base that episode off of what's going on, but they just put it in front of you and say, hey, this is just a TV show. Have fun with it. But that's the point where we're at, is everything is data harvesting. I mean, you look at like the WikiLeaks files. Just for an example, the CIA has been using Windows for years for backdoors. For especially data harvesting, geolocation, pretty much anything you can possibly think of. These people, data is everything to them, because data is knowledge, data is information, and most importantly, data is money. And that's where you get really these advertisements and being able to craft these specific advertisements to specific viewers in these areas.
With what Elon's doing, it's obviously a step in the right direction, transparency, showing what really happened with the suppression of that story. Because regardless of what they want to say, if it was Don Jr.'s laptop, that story would have been everywhere. They wouldn't have called it Russian. They wouldn't have tried to cover it up before an election. So where do you see this going? And with Elon, do you think that do you think that this is to gain public favor in order to do something wrong? Or do you think he's just an American billionaire who it might be connected, but is similar to others where he's not so connected that he just thinks this is the right route to go?
See, I want to have give Elon the benefit of the doubt here and say, he is a good person, but he's a billionaire. He's connected with all these other billionaires. He's connected, with all these tech monopolies amongst, Tesla, everything else, all his companies. And his obsession with data is pretty worrisome. But I think Elon, is essentially, he likes to cause chaos. I think that's really what it is with Elon. We've seen he's been the biggest troll. He loves posting inappropriate memes. He loves, attacking people on the left and the right. And personally, I don't think Elon is, the savior, that the right's make him out to be. It's like the right has this uncanny obsession with, once a celebrity comes out or says literally virtually anything positive about the right wing, they latch onto them, and then they're so disappointed when they go against the grain or what is expected of them. But I think Elon is just a disruptor. I think he wants to cause chaos. And actually, someone in the chat actually just made a really good point. He said he's a DARPA stooge. He essentially took, I believe, grants from DARPA, and he's the founder of PayPal. People don't actually realize that. He goes back to PayPal, to I believe it's X.com, the kinds of things that he's doing. He's always been obsessed with data, and he's actually, done grants and other things with DARPA. So it's very interesting to see his connection with Neuralink, especially. And he's saying that, it can give people vision that have never been able to see before. It'll repair their eye receptors, even though they've never been able to use them. It just seems like he is almost the golden sheep, or whatever you would call it. He comes in and he saves the day, and then everyone's going to rely on him so heavily that there's not, no one's going to ask questions. We always know that we already know that he's pro-transhumanist. He's literally trying to install a chip in our brains. He says human trials are starting soon, even though it was thousands of monkeys that he's killed while doing this. I think 60 or so have survived.
And with the brain chip stuff, I was maybe I just forgot because I forgot his interviews years ago, but I was under the assumption that he was really interested in getting paralysis and blindness out of the way. But if you listen to the recent press conference, he's basically saying, the number one reason I'm doing this is to merge AI with humans because I don't believe humans will last if they don't merge with AI. And he said a secondary thing, if we fail at that, at least we'll help a few people. So it's really a secondary cause to help people. And honestly, in this world, you're allowed to believe that because the truth is AI is getting more and more powerful. So as an American citizen, he's allowed to think that the only way we're going to survive is to merge with AI. But of course, millions of us will say, well, that sounds like a sci-fi nightmare movie. And I believe that I will be able to survive without merging, so.
Yeah, well, and he wants us to be, superior beings, allegedly. But he doesn't want us to be as smart as him or have access to the same level of knowledge and information as him. Is really the Neuralink chip just kind of seems like a front to create a more subservient government. We know that the government has been obsessed with this for years, especially the CIA with MK Ultra, amongst their other mind control programs. They want you to literally be a subservient slave. And I don't think Elon is going to be any different in this regards at all.
Yeah, a chip in the brain is definitely a step in the direction of losing sovereignty. We'll put it that way.
We're going to be playing cyberpunk soon enough, but in real life.
We're getting close. Second story I want to talk about, because I want to get to a few, is our favorite welfare queen, Volodymyr Zelensky, is the Time Magazine Person of the Year, because I guess there's women who can win it. It's not Man of the Year anymore. And, this is quite the picture. It's so funny because he's an actor and a comedian. Like, actors like attention more than anybody and fame. Like, why else would you be an actor? It's like, look at this. Like, why would he ever stop? It's like, this is such a nice picture. He's like, oh man, I'm the man.
Put that back up again. I just noticed something. Get it close to where his head is. Look at where the M is located. It almost looks like he has horns.
Interesting.
The messaging is literally right in front of you. And I think they did this same thing last year or something, or a few other times. But we've seen Hitler was the Time Person of the Year. Stalin, you said like twice earlier.
I think, yeah.
So they're electing the best people, definitely, to end up on the front of these magazines.
With the fact checkers, they say that because if people say, oh, Hitler was the Man of the Year or whatever, Person of the Year now, and they'll be like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. I guess when they put certain people, they'll glorify certain people, and others they'll be like, well, they are the Man of the Year, but it's not necessarily a good thing. But what I'm wondering is if it was Stalin, like, did they look at Stalin in the same way as Hitler and be like, oh, he's the Man of the Year, but he's not all good? Like, I'm wondering if something tells me that the Stalin write-up was probably similar to the Zelensky one. That's just my intuition. But
we used to praise Stalin. You still got people on the left that look up to Stalin as a hero. But then, when you have Kanye come out and say these very controversial things about Hitler, it's terrible for him to say these things, which I don't agree with what Kanye said. But the left can sit there and praise, Stalin, who was a genocidal dictator, all day long and never get any pushback on it. But I always think it's funny is, especially with Zelensky now being the Time of the Year, the Man of the Year, is, he literally what war zone do actors go to and government officials go to and visit and do photo shoots and take these pictures? This obviously isn't a war zone in Kyiv or what they're presenting it as. It just seems like one big CIA psyop. He was literally gifted a Grammy Award. It's right in front of you. This guy is an actor. He's going to go down in history as, he acted his way into hundreds of billions of dollars.
I stopped covering it because at the beginning, I'm sure you saw left and right, they started posting Snake Island goes to Kyiv. And it sounded very like Subway sandwich, Jussie, 2 a.m., hanging out with the boys. And I was like, I'm not going to call it fake because I don't know it is. And I don't want to look like, I'm not going to declare something I don't know, but let me be patient. Everyone bit it. The Snake Island story ended up being a lie. Why was it a lie? Where did it come from? It came from Zelensky's mouth. So once I realized the first couple stories that really pushed the public into it were total fabrications, and they're demonetizing all my stuff. That's not why I stopped talking about it. I don't care about that. But it was just like, okay, what's the point of jumping on every story when 2 weeks later we find out it's a lie? But it's my fault for pointing out the lie. The propaganda is good because we need to fight Putin, and it's like it's very odd. And when I watch Fox News, sometimes it's on at the gym, and I'm watching, they have these like, it looks like stock footage. I'm not saying that there's no fighting happened, but they literally do use stock footage on the news sometimes just because it's easier and royalty free. Where I'm wondering, like, I know they said like maybe 100,000 people died or something. I'm not saying nobody died. I'm not trying to be a Putin Zelensky denier or whatever, but like that's my question: is how bad is this thing really? Like, where are they fighting? What's the end goal? I'm just completely confused by the whole dynamic of it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we're told in American media that Ukraine is without a doubt winning, and which I highly doubt that. They're not winning against Russia. I'm in multiple Telegram chats. One in specific, CIA warlord. Some of your chat probably is familiar with him on Twitter. He essentially posts nothing but war footage. I mean, there is a war going on. There are fights going on. But like you said, the Fox News in the gym it's not just Fox. It's multiple media outlets that have literally been caught trying to pass off old war footage. They just slap a filter on it and say, hey, this is what's going on in Ukraine. Look at these terrible bombs being dropped. And the next thing you know, it actually wasn't Ukraine. I mean, so they're literally recycling old footage and saying this is new.
See, I don't know too much about it, so I'm not going to speak on it. But from what you know or what you've seen, like, where are they fighting and what seems to be the end goal, or like where they're going with it? Because obviously, like you said, they're not fighting in every part. Like Ben Stiller's not on the front lines with Zelensky, but where are they fighting? Like what cities, what regions?
I mean, I can't speak on specific regions. I just pay attention to the videos, and I'm a old school lively kid. Grew up on the old internet where there wasn't censorship, so that's kind of what I pay attention to. But there definitely is fighting going on in some of these peninsulas, but it's not the fighting that they are saying is going on. I mean, they're not pushing each other back and forth in these regions. They're literally fighting in trenches. I mean, this is old school warfare. A lot of their gear is outdated. And we saw, I believe it was with the NBC report, that the billions of dollars that was actually going to Ukraine wasn't even making it there. I mean, the good majority of the weaponry wasn't making it there. And then NBC pulled their documentary down before it could actually even stay up for over a few days.
Right. I remember that because they were looking into it and they were like, we don't know where the weapons are even going.
Yep. I mean, I call Ukraine like the new Afghanistan. If you've ever seen that video of Julian Assange essentially explaining how Afghanistan works with the infinite money laundering, and the military industrial complex doing kickbacks. I mean, that's literally what's going on in Ukraine right now, is we are trying to essentially prolong the war as long as we can to fund even more endless wars, because endless wars, there's no more profitable time for the U.S. We're giving away billions of dollars, but it's coming right back into the politicians' pockets every single time. And I don't know if you saw the most recent video. The Defense Ministry of Ukraine posted it on Twitter. It was this Ukraine soldier, doing this Pikachu dance. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay, that's, this is a PSYOP division. The Ukraine's going to go down in history as having some of the best PR, throughout any wars. I think Ukraine's winning in the PR game, but there's no way that Russia isn't actually winning on the ground when it comes to this.
They're quoting Jay-Z as well. Like, they definitely have some like trendy, smart people. Yep. I printed this out. It said last week the IRS stated that Americans must report their payments on Venmo and PayPal of over $600. Last week, Defense Department failed its fifth ever audit, unable to account for more than 61% of its assets, worth about $1.8 trillion. So they've admitted that they don't know where a lot of the weapons and money is going in Ukraine. ABC, like you said, I think they put it out, took it back because of the backlash. They didn't want to seem pro-Putin for doing actual journalism. $1.8 trillion. It's just, it's crazy town.
I mean, I'm not going to say much, but I remember what happened the last time the Pentagon and the Defense Department lost a few $1 trillion. So it should be interesting to see how these next few months really advance.
And with what's going on in Ukraine, before we move to the last topic, what's unfortunate is, because I do love America, although, there's corruption all over the world. Obviously, it's not perfect. You have the CIA, the FBI, they're doing all sorts of tricks, and they have an agenda and they're doing certain things. And I think that some of them probably think that they're doing stuff for America in the best interest, and like they know better than us. And in some cases, maybe it's true. Who knows? I'll even admit that that's a possibility. I don't know everything that's going on, but at the same time, I think you look with this Russian war, and I love America to the point where I want to say I think we overplayed our hand a little bit because we think everyone's going to fall in line with us, but Russia's not, China's not, the Arab world is not. A lot of like Saudi Arabia and even India, which is our big ally, but they're not even totally playing along with us. So I think at a certain point, if America doesn't become a little bit more humble or strategic with their bully game, we're going to lose a lot of power. And, the people that push back, we don't do it for Putin or another country. It's like at a certain point, if America does lose that power and everybody starts to trade around us and do stuff around us, like they're starting to do in Africa, the Middle East, and Russia, and
with
even
BRICS
and Asia, it's like at a certain point, like every great empire eventually falls when they overexpand and get a little too cocky.
Well, and I think we're in the intentional decline of America. I mean, we are in the fourth turning at this point. We are going down as a civilization. I mean, you look at the culture, it's completely destroyed. You have little kids essentially neutering themselves at the guidance of their parents. And that's just, a little insight into it. But I mean, you made a good point with essentially trade being destroyed. I mean, Russia has begged and begged. Russia should be one of our greatest allies. I mean, the amount of opportunity that would open up to America, but they have talked about, joining the New World Order. And we've flat out told them no. I mean, Russia is the boogeyman, and they have been ever since the Cold War. I mean, it's communism this, communism that. And, we are not willing to work with Putin. We would rather work with Israel and have Israel own Congress, which you're not allowed to talk about that. But I mean, even Trump said that himself, that Israel has bought in Congress. Netanyahu and others brag about this. And now you got Russia and other countries essentially trying to join BRICS, which, it hasn't actually formed yet from my knowledge. But I mean, BRICS is going to be an alternate trading off of the petrodollar. I mean, this is going to get very interesting in the next few years. Is you're going to have Russia, you're going to have China, amongst other people that you weren't supposed to push together, especially Russia and China. I mean, Reagan, that was his number one, basically his ideology is you're not supposed to put these two countries together, because when you do, it's going to be disastrous for America. But instead, we just keep doing the exact same thing over and over again and pushing war, essentially. I mean, because it's profitable to America, but it's the complete and intentional decline of America. Is they want us to be subservient. They want us to be slaves. I mean, you're going to start seeing food, basically the food cycle is breaking down, and we already have. I mean, the Taylor Hanson's an Umbop guy. I just saw that in the chat. Yes. But I mean, the end of America is coming, and I would argue that America isn't even a country anymore. I mean, this is a proxy country. We're propped up by essentially nothingness and an idea. I mean, you're having someone also just said in the chat that you got CCP stations in Canada and actually coming into the U.S. now. I mean, you're going to have the UN put boots on the ground in America soon, and you're not going to have a constitution left. I mean, I would argue we don't even have a constitution. We've been trampled on the past few years.
Yeah, I think on a positive note, obviously, like there's a lot of corruption here. I think in other countries, there's, you could say more or less. It depends. We export a lot, but there's still some sort of rule of law a little bit. Do you think if we reclaim our culture, like reclaim God, I think America is getting cursed right now because we've turned our back on morality. And I think, to turn the ship around, we have to look inside. We can't just have Joe Biden, 80 years old, Trump selling vaccines, like people fighting with each other. I don't think God looks at that and is like, oh yeah, that's really great. And the culture that we're exporting. So I think America still has a lot of power and potential, but if we can get right internally, and, although obviously, history is evil and a lot of bad things have happened, obviously, if you look at what the people that are doing to us now, I mean, there's a lot of diseases that are on the rise. Why are they on the rise? There's a lot of obesity on the rise. Yes, it's part because we have so much opportunity and that's a blessing, but really we're being scammed. And I think cultures of the past, although they were imperfect and evil to many extents, I think they used to have some sort of like pride in their people and just like belief in God and like, well, let's build a great building. I see all these amazing buildings that they built in Rome and Egypt, everything, all over the place. Now what are we building? Everything's a scam. Everything's how many people can we fit in a cube to just maximize money? Nobody loves their people anymore. Nobody loves God anymore. Nobody loves beauty anymore. And I think in order for America to succeed, I don't want to give up on my country, but we need to get back to those days, because these days of fitting everyone in a cubicle, shoving as much high fructose corn syrup in their mouth and shoving pharmacy products in their body to make $1, we're scamming our people. And, any criticism of Iran or China or Russia or anyone is fine, but we need, like, if we fix ourselves, that's when the world respects us again, in my opinion.
I mean, and America used to be a stronghold. I mean, America was so respected. America was the best place to be. And I would argue it still is one of the best places to be. I mean, but we're poisoning our citizens. We're killing our citizens at this point. We're locking our citizens up. And I hate, the whole black pill position. As I still, a lot of the terms and a lot of the things and the way I word things, it sounds like I'm black pilled, but I am white pilled. Is we need to restore God, in this sovereign nation. And once we bring God back and we can save the culture, we have to get rid of this trans ideology, these drag queens dancing for children. The left used to be anti-war and now they're pro-war as long as it benefits them and their political ideologies. And, we need to stop being so subservient. And the COVID, that was a real wake up, at least to me, is seeing, everyone says that Americans have revolution, in their blood. But then you see, COVID lockdowns and over half of the population just becomes subservient slaves. So we really need to restore God because we are absolutely godless. I mean, they left liquor stores open, they left drugstores open, but then they closed churches. I mean, so it shows you the trajectory that we're going in. But if we can bring God back into the nation, I mean, that's really where we're going to start being taken seriously again. And I think, we're probably heading into end days if we haven't already started the end days. Is I think, we are reliving Revelations. We are past Sodom and Gomorrah at this point. We're legalizing things that shouldn't be legal. We're normalizing things that shouldn't be normalized. So we really need to restore God and culture, and that's the only way we're going to win.
What do you think about this? Because people bring that up all the time with the end days and Revelation, where, even in World War I, World War II, there was a lot of this degeneracy and, people were trying to restore that and successfully at parts, and then it went back. So I think, do you think that, because Christians always think it's the end times, there have been orgies and, for hundreds of years where people look at it, society declines, come back. Do you think it's possible that we're not that close and we're just going through a cycle? Because I do think it's the craziest time ever with computers and stuff. But at the same time, these cycles have happened, and there have been, what Christians would consider filth, like just taking over the cities before.
Exactly. Well, and I don't think, the world is going to end immediately. I don't think in our lifetime we're going to see the actual play out of the full Revelations chapter. As I think we have entered it, and now we're in the time of testing, essentially. I don't think time moves, say a year. This is just, an example. In the Bible, or at least in Christ's terms, you say Genesis, he created the world in just a few days. It's going to be thousands of years. I mean, we have been going through this cycle for such a long time. I do still think that there is a way to restore the greatness of this nation. And like I said, we're in the fourth turning right now. We're in the revolution cycle. So we're really going to start restarting. And I think we're going to restore, the greatness of America. We're going to bring Christianity back to America, but then we're going to continue the exact same cycle. What is the saying is that, strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And that's where we're in right now. Is we are in the era of weak men creating hard times, and now we're going to have strong men step up and really put this country back on track.
I have one more question before I want to get to the last story real quick, but I've noticed left-wingers kind of bring this up when right-wingers talk about like the child stuff, the drag queen story hour. They put pictures of pageants, like little girl pageants where there's 6-year-olds doing beauty pageants. Do you think that's too far as well? That people
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think child beauty pageants is disgusting. And I actually am planning on, because the work I do here locally in Texas, I go undercover at these drag shows and expose what's going on and what these kids are being exposed to on a daily basis. And, I've been looking for child pageants to expose. Because more conservatives identify with child pageants. It's not liberal moms putting their children into these things. And, I would argue child pageants is just as bad, if not worse. But they're all disgusting. They're all against God. And, there's no excuses for either side. It is the conservatives that are hosting these kinds of shows, and it's always the single mothers. It is always on both sides, the single mothers that expose their children to this. I don't know what it is about them, but they have an addiction for sin, essentially.
I always thought those shows were kind of odd. Like they had a child pageant show, and I was always like, "That's." They
have kids, in very skimpy outfits performing for men. It's very weird. It's all peculiar.
Last story I want to talk about real quick is yesterday they had a special election in Georgia between Herschel Walker and Ralph Warnock, and somehow, because I talk way too much, I never keep my mouth closed, but I kept my mouth closed when everyone was like, it's Trump's fault that Herschel Walker lost. It's the establishment's fault that Herschel walked. Democrats spent too much money. Like, everyone was blaming everyone for the Herschel Walker. Some people blamed him. They said he's a bad candidate. I was like, I didn't say anything. So I just kind of want to hear your take real quick of like, what's going on there, and what do you think about him losing that special election in Georgia?
I mean, I honestly, going into it, I thought he was going to lose. I mean, you're going against Raphael Warnock, which is not a good candidate either. I mean, both of these people are on record essentially being abusers of some sort. I mean, Herschel Walker, if you've seen recently, Christian Walker, his son, came out, and there's been a lot of controversy amongst the right, saying you made your dad lose the election, which I don't think is true at all. I mean, Twitter isn't real life. People should know this by now. His child coming out and saying things that were true about his dad being an abuser and, holding a gun to his mother's head, amongst other things, abandoning his children. I mean, yeah, that might have a little bit of sway amongst the vote, but Republicans are going to vote Republican regardless. And then you got Trump saying, hey, you don't need to vote in these elections, which, we saw this in the last runoff here in Georgia. I mean, so there's a lot of things that factored into it. But then you got Warnock ran over his wife's foot. I mean, you have an abuser versus an abuser. So, the best abuser will win. Everyone's criminals. And in politics, you always vote for the lesser of two evils is how I see it. But I think, they're both terrible candidates. Herschel Walker should have never ran, but the only reason he did is Trump essentially called him and said, hey, I want you to run. You're going to run. And then against the advisement of his own family, he ran anyways. I mean, they said, hey, you had a very crazy past. You've done a lot of crazy things. This is going to get unearthed. And then he said, oh, well, we're going to run anyways against his family's advice. So I just think it was a situation where you had two bad candidates going against each other. And the left is energized right now because of Roe v. Wade, amongst other things. And the right is essentially just blackpilled.
I saw that they raised, between the two of them, I think Warnock raised almost $100 million more or something. But They raised upwards of like $400 million. And I know some of it's super PACs and rich people, but like there are people spending millions of dollars. And I'm just like laughing at myself because, on one hand, we're like, we want better candidates, but you have these two people, you're treating them like they're epic. Like, oh my gosh, you're going to save the world. You're going to save the country. You're giving them hundreds of millions of dollars. Their faces everywhere. They go around and speak. It's almost like breeding narcissism. And I mean, everybody makes money, musicians, etc. I get it. But it's just funny. You have these two people. Herschel Walker is actually, I think, a cool guy. I mean, he was like, football player. He's not, the fame's not new to him per se, but like Warnock, like in normal society, like would this guy be like people throwing their money at him? Like, oh my God, Dr. Oz, John Fetterman, Fetterman, you're so cool, dude. Like, oh my God, like, dude. And then they're like walking around like, dude, I really am cool. Like, dang, I'm the man.
I mean, I personally, I think you have to be a narcissist to run for office nowadays. I mean, 99% of these politicians are all narcissists. They are all essentially industry plants, the good majority of them. I mean, who told Dr. Oz to run? Who thought it was a good idea to run a progressive, because that's exactly what Dr. Oz is, against Fetterman? I mean, and that election is the funniest thing to me in Pennsylvania is, Pennsylvania, I don't care what anyone says, it is a red state. They should be electing Republicans. And yet they still lost because they wanted to run a progressive. And the left has always had better strategists. They've always had better operatives. And the whole reason I got into the industry at the beginning of this in 2020 is because I saw that the right was losing ground every single year. They're always playing defense, 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 defense. And they never wanted to go onto the offensive. And then meanwhile, you got the left taking tricks out of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, and they're obliterating the right, every single step of the way. So I always tell the right, and, I've worked before I was a journalist, behind the scenes in campaigns, done some strategy stuff. And it's like, you have to be worse than the left. Yeah, you don't want to be godless. You don't want to be disgusting like the left is. But you need to essentially play dirtier. You need to play harder than the left is, or you're just going to keep losing. And that's exactly what we have now. Every time we lose an election, we scream fraud, which, yeah, there is some weird fraudulent things going on, potentially, you could argue, on both sides, though. I mean, we saw, back in the days, George Bush, the whole 9 yards. We've seen this all throughout politics. But now we just want to scream at each other and say, oh, this side's doing this doing this, instead of actually proposing ideas and good candidates to make a change.
Well, do you think, I mean, and I don't know, because I don't really get that involved in politics, but like, do you think you have to play dirty per se? Where like, DeSantis, I think he cleaned up election laws. He appealed to a lot of independents and he blew away his competition. Dr. Oz seems like a nice guy, but when I was listening to him talk on Fox News, like Trump was a billionaire who sounded like he kind of wasn't. You know, he did a good job of sounding like a normal person. Dr. Oz, no offense, he never sounded like that. He always just sounded like he didn't sound like he had a lot of passion or he was interested. Like,
he was a program.
Yeah, so, you know, and Fetterman, although he's obviously a clown, like, you know, he looked like an average person, although he's like 7 foot tall and couldn't talk. Like Dr. Oz, you know, people in Pennsylvania were making the claim that he didn't even really live there. So they ran these kind of candidates that couldn't connect. I think DeSantis, although this is not like a full endorsement of everything he's done, people, every time I compliment him, I'm like, oh, he did a better job with like big pharma than Trump. And people are like, oh, you like everything he did. I'm just calling it like I see it. But in general, you know, DeSantis created his own narrative. He didn't just sit and say, I'm going to say the same 10 things as Trump. He's like, this is my narrative. This makes sense. This is what people are going through. A lot of people just kind of copy paste what other people are doing, or they just kind of like say what they think is going to get them the endorsement. And I think those days are over. And, you know, like you said, playing catch up, I think social media, social engineering culture matters more. I saw, just a side note, the biggest show I think in recent history is that this new, I haven't seen it, but it's called Wednesday. And this girl, Jenny Ortega, who's the actress, she gained 10 million followers on Instagram. Like it was the quickest rise in followers that's ever happened. And I go to her Instagram and right on the top, she has a link to Planned Parenthood. Right. And then I go and click on the Wednesday movie because I'm like, what is this? It's like a rehash of the Addams Family. And the first thing is like blood raining down on her and her like licking her lips, but it's paint or something. I'm like, this is everyone. I don't watch TV for this reason. I don't like these creepy shows, but they're winning the culture. They're getting tens of millions of people to funnel to this girl. She's funneling them to Planned Parenthood. So instead of, you know, giving $100-200 billion to Herschel Walker to lose an election, it's like, that money. Are you kidding me? Like, I could start 7 media companies with that much money, you know, and you're just giving it to Herschel Washer, who didn't even win. You spent $200 million and lost. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you made a really good point with what they're doing with Jenny Ortega. I mean, the left knows how to play the game, and they have for years, and that's why they continue to win in these situations. I mean, they can virtually do anything and raise money off of it. I mean, we saw that BLM, a lot of the good majority of money that went to BLM was funneled into Act Blue and then donated to the Democrat Party. And they've done this with Ukraine. I mean, with the FTX scandal, they've done it with so many things. Is they raise money like no one's business. And then they know how to propagandize and to push the youth especially. I mean, they have taken over my generation. Gen Z, I would say, is 90% Democrat, you know, and not even just Democrat, but far left. And then, you know, the Gen Z that are on the right, I mean, they're very intelligent, they're very intellectual, but you know, 10% or so can only do so much. But the left, when they know how to play the game better, they know how to control culture. And, you know, they've had a head start on this for years. They've controlled Hollywood for the longest time. And so now the right is trying to play catch up. And, you know, we have like the Daily Wire types, right? And, you know, people can say they hate or like the Daily Wire types. Personally, I have a lot of disinterest with Daily Wire and the certain hosts that work there. But they're doing the right thing in regards to culture. They're making movies, you know, they're putting out documentaries. Right. And that's exactly what the right should have been doing 20 years ago. But now we're playing catch up. And, you know, we're really seeing it in the culture, especially is, you know, no matter how many people say that, you know, this is a Christian country, is we are no longer a Christian country. We truly aren't, is because the left has overhauled absolutely everything within the culture and they've completely taken over.
I think compassion goes a long way too. Maybe it's just my soft heart, but you know, if you're there's tens of millions of kids that think like abortion and birth control is cool. And on that Planned Parenthood link that Jenny Ortega had, it had birth control too. And here's my
which ruins women, absolutely ruins women.
Right. And this is a take, because if you just say like you're killing someone, I'm not saying you're technically wrong, like, but at the same time, is that an argument that's really going to make sense to a girl that has never heard that argument? So with birth control, it's one of these things where, like, you know, at the end of the day, when you're taking it, it's altering your body to basically let you get nut in, for lack of a better term, and not have a and not have a child. Where it's like, you know, is it obviously if you want to have sex, but it's like sex is really, although it's pleasurable, obviously, it's really to make a baby. So in order to not have a baby, you're basically like shutting off or totally doing all this to your body just so you could do that. And once you get older, you realize it's not worth it and it's not good for you. So, you know, even just how I said it there, I have a lot of people that follow me on Instagram that aren't even right wing, but it's like, I feel like I'm a more principled right-leaning person than most Republicans, but I don't even sound like it because I don't talk like I'm yelling at people all the time. Like, I hate you, I hate you. I'm like, I get, I feel bad for tens of millions of kids. They're watching Wednesday. They're clicking these links. So, you know what I'm saying? They think they're fighting the old, Republican guard. And I remember what it was like because I thought that when I was young too. I never liked Democrats, like, oh, I'm an Obama fanatic, but they brainwash you. Even if you're not brainwashed, they still brainwash you to thinking like both parties are corrupt, but Republicans are worse. Where the truth is really the opposite. Both parties are corrupt and garbage, but it's actually Republicans that are slightly better. So we need to, obviously, movies, culture, but an ounce of compassion really goes a long way in my perspective. And these right-wing influence, but at the same time, sometimes you do got to get in there and like shift over to Windows. So I think everyone plays a role, but I would love to see more people putting out arguments that kind of like, can convince. That's what a great documentary
we got to
does.
stop using the exact same thing because they obviously don't have the traction that we need. And to touch on your point you made a little bit earlier about birth control is literally destroying women. And you know how they teach these women. I mean, even, Mormons, the LDS Church especially, is they put all their kids on birth control. I mean, this is just natural now. And Christians, I mean, it is a normal thing for a woman once she hits puberty to go on to birth control. And, the people that are installing this birth control, they're not taught in school during sex ed or these other things. They're just taught that, hey, birth control is good. Birth control is a form of conception. When in reality, birth control spikes your hormones, it makes you unstable, and it's literally making you a person that you aren't. But they don't teach you, the negatives of birth control. They just teach you the positives. Say, hey, it will help with cramps. It'll help with your natural cycle. When in reality, it does the exact opposite. And you said it makes it easier for women to get nutted in, but it's like if schools actually taught.
Sounds worse when you say it. It sounded more graceful when I said, no, I'm just kidding.
But if schools actually taught, if they weren't taken over by the left and the establishment at this point and bad actors, if they taught women how to manage their natural cycles, I mean, they can literally, there's times of the month where they can have sex and they're not fertile. But they're not taught this. Instead, they're taught to take this pill or to get this Nexaplon implant into their arm so then they can continue to be irresponsible and do something that is actually made for reproduction purposes only.
Right. And I know that the left just seems cooler. Like when you're younger, they seem cooler because the right is telling you not to do certain stuff. So that's, something to think about is how to get the message across and not seem like it's lame. Because when I was in, say, college, if I met a Christian guy who's like, oh, I'm not having sex till marriage, I'm like, lame,
loser. You're a loser.
But now I'm like, dang, that guy was actually cool and smart. And after you go this path for so long, you realize it's actually not cool. So, how to get that message across, I'm not really sure. But I think there's a lot of progress being made. But as you said, the youth, and no offense, because I know TPUSA is doing a lot of work too, and they're trying, but like Charlie Kirk tends to often say like, oh, the youth is like going way right wing. Like I'm like, bro, I don't see it. I don't think so. And I know we want to be positive, but like, I think it's fair to say that the youth is totally, even if the moderates in the youth, I think that the pendulum has swung so far left that the average like moderate, I don't care about politics is further left than like a left winger 8 years ago, in my view.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's the thing is, we're, the Shapiro types and, the Charlie Kirk types, they always tell us that this young generation is going to save America, when in reality, it's the exact opposite. Is the left is they're using the same tactics. And I'll straight up say it, they're using Hitler-esque tactics. Hitler said, if you can overcome 1 or 2 generations, if you can truly overtake their ideology, you win the war, you win the culture. And that's exactly what we're seeing is, essentially, the left has co-opted our youth, and now we have a bunch of young lefties. And naturally, as you get older and get more mature, you start, leaning more right-wing because it's money policies, other things that actually responsible adults care about. But now we're getting to a point of where these kids are growing up and they're not growing out of it. They're staying in that left-wing mind. So we have to really figure out something to do with this. And I think compassion, that has been the left's platform for the longest time. That's why it's appeasing to young people is, we help the poor, we help the weak, we give the people things. And, I'm not saying more welfare programs, that's the last thing we need and things like that. But we need to change our tactics and the way that we advertise. We need to be the party of the compassionate. We need to be the party that actually helps people. And that's how you can get younger people on board.
Yeah, I think a lot there are some people who do that and make a good case, but I think a
Mhm.
lot of people it's almost like they're very spiteful. Like the left is very spiteful against the right, and a lot of them
Yep.
are fed off like the anger and the hate. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of right wingers that are the same. It's almost like they got rejected, so now it's like high school. They're like, haha, you suck. Ha
Yep.
ha ha ha. Ha. I win, and it's like, I don't know how much that works, but I get it. There was someone I don't know exactly who said this, but the older conservatives thought that these kids would just go into the real world and grow out of it. But instead, they went into the real world and changed the real world into their world. So I think that
Mhm.
was a ultimate mistake of the past. You know, not to harp on it, but they were just like, oh, you're going to go into the real world and you'll learn. But instead, they shifted the real world into that world that they had, and it's now ruining the actual world. Which that was
Yeah,
a big,
they've created themselves a false reality, so to speak, and
but
now
it's
we
real
now we
now.
have to live in it.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now it's working. So where can people find you? Thanks for joining me today, and thanks for the insight and your perspective.
Of course, thank you for having me, brother. It's always
Yes.
great.
Where
And
can
I
people
mean,
find you?
everyone can find me at Taylor USA. It is Tayler USA, how it's supposed to be spelled. No OR in this house, but Tayler USA on Twitter. That's where I primarily do all my field reporting and my posting.
Taylor USA with the E. He does a lot of stuff too. Check out his videos. And for me, if you guys can, if you're watching, stayintouchwithme.com. You just type in stayintouchwithme.com or look in the link. It's my free email list. I appreciate it. I think my shadow ban is up on Facebook for my posts. So I'm trying to get as many people signed up. And I promise I'll do something cool with it. I don't really send out that many emails. I know I sell hats a lot because that's all I have. But I will try to utilize that in some sort of interesting way. I just kind of have my hands full. Thanks for joining me, Taylor, and thanks everybody for watching. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Yes, sir.